Let's get back on the Darth Talon build and finish her up. I started prepping the pieces by painting them magenta first before we start hitting them with the red. I'm just painting burnt red from Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl, and that's going to go over the base coat of the magenta, and the red should look much better. Next thing to paint up is the tattoos on here. I thought they were going to be simple, but they were not. I'm using Monument Hobbies Coal Black to cut in the little ribbon around the end of the lekku. Then we're going to do the tattoos with that also. And here's a lekku all done up. I was frustrated, really frustrated with this. The first thing I did was I cut them in. I went over the edges. I didn't care. So I was going to cut the red back in over that. And that didn't work out well because it just took too many layers. So I resprayed the red, and then I used the proper paint brushes to get those all cut in. And you can see here on her torso, I did the same thing. I had sloppy black, and I just went back over it with red to clean up all the edges. And the next thing I do is I'm going to go in with a round 2 paintbrush, I think it was, and a spotter 5, just to go along the edges and then get everything cut in nice and neatly. This was really a task to do. And here you can see I have all the red blocked in. I don't mind the shading on the black. It gives me a little bit of definition of where I'm going to put those tattoos. I took a well-needed break from her body painting that red and black, so I moved over to her thighs, which is a lot easier. This is just regular Tamiya black. I don't remember if it's XF1 or not. So I just sprayed up the whole thigh with black, and then I'm going to go back in and do her armor and her straps. While I have the black out, I want to get other parts done. Right here, we're going to be doing her hoo-ha protector. So we're going to paint all these little strappy things black, and also the little thing on front black. And looking at different pictures, that looks black with just the 2 or actually 4 little bolts. That would be either a silver or a gunmetal or something like that. I went with oily steel eventually. And staying with the black theme, we're going to do her Sith CFMBs here, and we're going to get these all painted up black. She does have some armor on these also. And then eventually I'll put a gloss coat on these because we want to have a few different black within her figure. For her breastplate, I went in with Pro Acryl's Coal Black. I didn't want to do this by airbrush because I knew I was going to get overspray because I was going to be lazy and not mask anything off. I just didn't feel like it. So I just went in with the brush. If you thin down Pro Acryl very well, it comes out really nice. Do it in thin layers and you won't even see any brush marks. And while I have the Pro Acryl's Coal Black out, I'm starting to do the tattoos on the front here, which again are very difficult. But if you take your time and use the proper brushes, you could just get those edges really nice and then fill in with a number 2 in the middle. When you start working on her head, you're going to even need smaller brushes because the tattoos are a little smaller. So let me get to finishing these up. All the tattoos are done, and I'm sorry you didn't see me painting them, but I have to have the piece all the way up to my face. I have to buy another couple tripods and cameras so I could get better angles for you guys. And here she is. I glossed her up to make sure that all of that paint is preserved and I don't scratch anything. And when I am doing the metal portions now, if I do somehow slip and go onto any of the red or black, I could take a Q-tip and water real quick and wipe it off because it's sealed. Just like the rest of the armor, I'm using Pro Acryl's Dark Silver, and I'm going in here by hand again. This is big enough where I can paint it by hand and thin it down and we won't have any brush marks. Now that I have the dark silver in there, she does have 4 little bolts on the side of the armor, and I'm just going to paint those with oily steel. Now that the armor's all done up, I didn't clear coat it. I'm just going over it with a black wash to make it a little darker and maybe look a little grungier. Okay, all our parts are pretty much done, and now I have to get the wiring up through here, which was not a simple task. I end up having to take her off the desk, put her in my lap, and get this wire through. After 15 minutes, I finally got it through. We're putting on some DAP Rapid Fuse here so we could get our first piece, the arm, attached to the model kit, which is very nice. And then, of course, we're going to have to test that light and make sure I didn't break any of the wiring. And of course, while I was at it, I popped her second arm on. I made the stupid mistake of messing up the black before, so I'm going back over it with red. This way, I could go back in and do all those tattoos on her hips, plus her thong. Tattoos are painstakingly done. Again, the next thing to do on here is this belt, and that's going to be that silver color that we used before. Again, hand painting this in because it's easy enough and you don't have to mask anything off, and this is the dark silver by Pro Acryl. Once it was dry, again, I went in with a black wash just to deepen it and make it a little grungier. Time to run the wire through her hips, which was a lot easier than doing her arm through her torso. With the wire through, it's time to add my favorite DAP Rapid Fuse onto the key over here and a little bit on the top half. And then I'm going to put these two together, just hold it tight, and we'll have the torso and her hips together, and we're moving right along on the build. Unfortunately, when I put the parts together, there is a gap between the top half of her body and the lower half of her body, and it's very noticeable in the back. The gap is rather big. This time I did mask her off with cellophane. And what I'm using is this stuff called FunCure. It's light curing putty that I'm putting into that gap, and then you use your UV flashlight to cure it. I wasn't going to put her in the photo booth, or the curing booth, I should say, because I don't know what it would do to the paint. After it was all in there, cured, sanded down, whatever I had to do to it, I went back in with red very, very gently, making sure I didn't get it on those tattoos. Covered it up. I didn't mind going over the belt because it's a lot easier to paint that silver back in than fix those tattoos. So we're fixing up this piece and we won't have that gap any longer. Jumping back over to her thighs, I was dry brushing it with the blue to bring out some of the detail, but the detail was getting all muted and it looked ugly. So I just went back in here with a satin coat on it to make it a little different than the other black. Time for the armor, and you guessed it, the dark silver from Pro Acryl. And once we're done with the dark silver, we move over to the oily steel from Vallejo and we do the little bolts on the side of the armor. And the final step, of course, is to add the black wash onto the armor. And this wash is from Pro Acryl. You got to water it down some. If you don't, I feel like it's very gummy. So make sure you water it down and get a nice even coat on there so it looks good. Both legs are done up. I think they came out nice. The black has that nice sheen to it, and we get to put them on her body. First, I'm going to start with the easy thigh that we don't have to put any wire through. Again, just using DAP Rapid Fuse on the key and then a little on the top of the piece, and I'm going to fit it in there. As you can see, the one thigh is on. I got the wire through the second one. So time to put the DAP Rapid Fuse on here. And that was a mission again to get it through the leg. I had to pull out supports and stuff like that. Put the DAP Rapid Fuse on, like I said, and we will get this tucked up in there and we'll have almost her whole body done. And here she is. She's getting huge. If you haven't built quarter scale before, be prepared for a very big model. Time for the last of her armor, the armor on the boots. They're all glossed up, so this was a little more difficult. I had to get the dark silver on there, even a very, very thin layer. Let it dry up. This way I could put the other layers on there. Once it's dry and matte, the other layers stick to it much, much better. And then I got full opacity on it after about 3 layers. Here you can see on the front, well, on the side there, it's pretty solid, the silver. The next thing I have to do are the back straps, and these are a little bit more difficult because of the top rib and the bottom rib. I really have to be careful. I mean, the paint wipes off really easy if I get out of the lines. I don't really feel like going back and forth cleaning up, so I was just very careful. The armor's done, and back to your favorite and mine, oily steel from Vallejo for the little nuts on the side, or bolts on the side, I should say. And to finish it off, we're going back in with that black wash, and I know it's very repetitive, but there weren't a lot of colors on this model, so it was just the same thing over and over again. And onto the left side, which is the easier side. So we're going to get that boot on, and then I got to get the wire through the other side. I have to say, for this 3D print, the pieces fit together really, really well, except for that one gap that we had between the upper torso and her hips. After snaking that wire through, a little DAP Rapid Fuse is going to go on here as usual. I'm going to squeeze these parts together, and we will pretty much have a full body. The last thing that we're going to have to do is her head and her lekku. And speaking of her head, it's time to get the red on there. So all I'm doing is putting down the base coat of the burnt red from Pro Acryl over the magenta base coat that we have. Well, I guess it's not a base coat and a base coat. It's a base coat and the next coat. Who knows? They're coats of paint. Working on her hoo-ha protector, we're getting the oily steel out, and we're just doing these few bolts on here. There's only 4. And like I said, in most of the reference pictures that I saw, this just looked black. And sorry to my deviant little friends out there, you're not going to see any more space toe because I have to put the hoo-ha protector on. So I just put in the little hole over there. We put some DAP Rapid Fuse. We're going to grab the hoo-ha protector, pop it in there, and that'll be one less piece that we have to put on her body. I broke out the nice little piece of foam to make sure that she was safe, added the wire down into the base. I put some DAP Rapid Fuse into the 2 holes for her feet. The next thing I'm going to do is get her feet in here, get her secured to the base. As you can tell, she's huge. I could barely get her into the camera frame anymore. So I'm going to have to figure out how these big models, how I'm going to do it, and we're going to have to get some more cameras or something for you guys. And here's a bit of a better view. The base is secured to her feet. As you can tell, I'm pulling her up and down into the camera frame. This way you could get a good look at her body. And now we're going to move on to getting that head done. Starting with the easiest part, her choker. This is coal black from Pro Acryl, so I'm going to start painting that up. And then I'm going to move on to that thing that's on the side of her head that's kind of like ears. That's supposed to be be part of her lekku. It's supposed to be some kind of communication. I think the lekku are like antennas or something like that, but we're going to do that a little different once we get to that part. Once it's painted in black, we're going to put a satin over it just so those blacks are a little different. And why I want the blacks different, the tattoos actually meet up at those earpieces. I was going to paint the earpieces silver, but after doing a little research, they're actually supposed to be their body color or black. And the last fun part is getting these tattoos done. But I'm using the number 2 brush here. That's good for the wider portions, but you want to really use smaller brushes to outline it because these tattoos are a lot smaller on her head than on her upper body or on her hips. So as you can see, I'm trying to outline here on the bigger spots, and that's going well, but a little later on, which I don't think I recorded, I make a mess of things. And her head's all done up. Those tattoos were a bit of a pain in the neck, but they're in there. They came out nice and crisp, so I can't complain about that. The next thing we're going to do is, once I'm done pointing at her face here, is we got to work on her eyes. I actually lied. The next thing I did was her lips, and I used that burnt red, and I added a little bit of purple at a time to make it a deeper red. And then I put a satin coat over them, not a gloss coat, to make them a little bit shinier. For the eyes, the first thing I did was I put in ivory. Don't use a bright white. Bright white's going to look very silly on a figure like this. Bright white is more if we're going to do cartoon characters or something like that. But the nice thing about these 3D prints is most of the artists put the eyes where they belong. This way you don't have to worry about where she's looking, one eye to the left and one eye to the right and stuff like that. And here, I don't have the camera angles to really show you how I did it. What I did was I had the red circle in there already. I used yellow for the eyes, and then I just put in a black pupil where it already was cut in for us. And here we go, getting to the finish line, zooming in a little bit. I had to raise the camera, just put some glue on her head. We're gonna pop her in there, hold it in, and then we'll get those lekku on. And our first lekku going on her left side, again, just popping glue on there and holding it in place. Lekku 2 secured to her head, which means we have a completed build. And here she is, almost all 2 feet of her, complete finally, after I think we started this maybe in December, but she's good to go. Now we just got to take the glory shots.